Hi there, cherished ones. Ran into a bit of a lull at work, and I thought, well, I need to do something. I need to be productive. And I turned to the side of my office and I found this book. This book is called Women Who Run with Wolves, was recommended to me by one of my friends at a Red Tent Gathering, which is a really beautiful collection of people. It's a global movement, actually, where women come together to heal, to nurture, and to support one another as part of the sisterhood. So when I came across this book, I thought, oh, there's something interesting about that, and it's something I wanted to share with my nieces and my cousins. And so, yeah, I'm going to be reading the first chapter from this book. And it's called Women Who Run with Wolves, Contacting the Power of the Wild Woman. I'm just going to read this wonderful, it's a second-hand book, and it had a lovely message, and I really liked it. So I'll start with reading that. 15th of October, 1996. Dear Mary, congratulations on turning 21. I wish you all the best for the future. You've been a great friend, and I truly believe in our friendship. We have a bond that can never be broken. I chose this particular book because I do believe that the female of the species is more deadly than the male. Believe it. May the saddest days of your future be no worse than the happiest days of your past. A Merry Christmas, an indication of how late this present is. All my love, Bronster. So from the onset, this book has shared something really playful, something about a real bond, friendship and sisterhood. So, yeah. Okay, let's get stuck in. I hope I say the author's name right. I'll read the foreword. We are all filled with a longing for the wild. There are few culturally sanctioned anecdotes for this yearning. We are taught to feel shame for such desire. We grew our hair long and used to hide our feelings. But the shadow of the wild woman still lurks behind us during our days and in our nights. No matter where we are, the shadows that trot behind us is definitely four-footed. Wow. Clarissa, Pinkola, Estes, PhD. Okay, so the introduction starts singing over the bones. Wildlife and the wild woman are both endangered species. Over time, we have seen the feminine instinctive nature looted, driven back and overbuilt. For long periods, it has been mismanaged like the wildlife in the wildlands. For several thousands of years, as soon as we turn our backs, it is relegated to the poorest land in the psyche. The spiritual land of the wild woman have, throughout history, been plundered and burnt, bulldozed, dens bulldozed, and natural cycles forced into unnatural rhythms to please others. It is not by accident that our pristine wilderness of our planet disappears as the understanding of our own inner wild nature fades. It is not so difficult to comprehend why old forests and old women are viewed as not important resources. It is not such a mystery. It is not so coincidental that wolves, coyotes, bears, and wildish women have similar reputations. They all share related instinctual archetypes, and as such, both are erroneously reputed to be ingraciously holy and innately dangerous and ravenous. My life and work as a Jungian analyst and cantadora, storyteller, have taught me women's flagging vitality can be restored by extensive psychic archaeological digs into the ruins of the female underworld. By these methods, we are able to recover the natural instinctive psyches, and through its personification, the wild women archetype, we're able to discern the ways and means of women's deepest nature. The modern woman is a blur of activity. She is pressured to be all things to all people. The all-knowing is long overdue. The title of this book, Women Who Run with Wolves, Myths and Stories of the Wild Woman Archetype, came from my study of wildlife biology, wolves in particular. The studies of the wolves, Canis lupus and can't read this properly, Canis Rufus. I like the history of women regarding both their spiritedness and their travails? I'm not sure. Healthy wolves and healthy women share a certain psychic characteristic: keen sensing, playful spirit, and heightened capacity for devotion. Wolves and women are relational by nature, inquiring, possess great endurance and strength. They are deeply intuitively, intensely concerned with their young, their mate, and their pack. They are experienced in adapting in constantly changing circumstances. They are fiercely stalwart and brave. Yet both have been hounded, harassed, and falsely imputed to be devoured and devious, overly aggressive, or less valued than those who are their detractors. They've been the target for those who would clean up the wild as well as the wildish environs of the psyche, extincting the instinctual and leaving no trace of it behind. The predation of wolves and women by those who misunderstand them are strikingly similar. So that is where the concept of the wild woman archetype first crystallised for me in the study of wolves. I studied other creatures as well, such as the bear, elephants, soulbirds, and butterflies. The characteristics of each species give abundant hints to know what it is to know about the female instinctive psyche. The wild woman passed through my spirit twice, once by my birth to a passionate Mexican-Spanish bloodline, and later through adopting by a family of fiery Hungarians. I was raised near the Michigan state line, surrounded by woodlands, orchards, and farmlands near the Great Lakes. There, thunder and lightning were my main nutrition. Cornfields creaked and spoke aloud at night. Far up the north, wolves came to the clearing in the moonlight, prancing and praying. We could all drink from the same stream without fear. Although I did not call her by that name, my love for the wild woman began when I was a child. I was an aesthetic rather than an athlete. My only wish was to be an aesthetic wanderer. Rather than chairs and tables, I preferred ground, trees, and caves, for in those places I could lean against the cheek of God. The river always called to be visited after dark. The fields needed to be walked so they could make their rustle talk. Fires needed to be built in the forest at night, and stories needed to be told outside the hearing of grown-up groups. I was lucky to be brought up in nature. Their lightning strikes taught me about sudden death and of the effervescence of life. Mice litters showed that death was softened by new life. When I unearthed Indian bread's trilobites from the loam, I understood humans have been here for a long, long time. I learnt the sacred art of self-decorations, with monarch butterflies perched atop my head, lightning bugs as my night jewellery, and the emerald green frogs as bracelet. A wolf mother killed one of her mortally injured pups. This taught me a hard compassion and the necessity of allowing death to come to the dying. These fuzzy caterpillars which fell from their branches and crawled up again taught me about single-mindedness. Their tickle walking on my arm taught me how skin comes alive. Climbing to the top of these trees taught what sex would someday feel like. My own post-World War II generation grew up in a time where women were infanticized and treated as property. They were kept as fallow gardens, but thankfully there was always a wild seed which arrived on the wind. Though what they wrote was unauthorized, women blazed away anyway. Though what they painted went unrecognized, it fed the soul anyway. Women had to beg for the instruments and the space needed for their arts, and if none were forthcoming, they made space in trees, caves, woods, and closets. Dancing was barely tolerated, if at all, so they danced in the forest where no one could see them, or in the basement, or on the way out to empty the trash. Self-decoration caused suspicion. Joyful bodies or dress increased the danger of being harmed or sexually assaulted. The very clothes on one's shoulders could not be called one's own. It was a time where parents who abused their children were simply called strict, where spiritual lacerations were profoundly exploited and women were referred to as nervous breakdowns, when girls and women who were tightly girdled, tightly reined and tightly muzzled were called nice. And those other females who managed to slip the collar for a moment or two of life were branded bad. Like so many women after me, I lived my life as a disguised creature. Like my kith thinking before me, I swaggered in high heels. I wore a dress and a hat to church, but my fabulous tail often fell below my hemline. My ears twitched until my hat pinched, or the very least, down over both my eyes and sometimes clear across the room. I have not forgotten the songs of those dark years, Hambra del Alma, the song of the starved soul. But neither have I forgotten the joyous Canto Hondo, a deep song, the words of which come back to us when we do the work of soul reclamation. Like a trail through the forest which becomes more and more faint and finally seems to diminish to nothing, traditional psychological theory too soon runs for the created and gifted, the deep women. Traditional psychology is often spared or entirely silent about the deeper issues to women, the archetypal, the intuitive, the sexual, the cyclical, the ages of women, a woman's way, a woman's knowing, her creative fire. This is what has driven my work on wild women archetypes for the better part of 2 decades. The women issue of soul cannot be treated by carving it into more acceptable forms as defined by an unconscious society, culture. Nor can she be bent into a more intellectually acceptable shape by those who claim to be soul bearers of consciousness. No, that is what has already caused suffering to millions of women who began as strong natural powers to become outsiders in their own cultures. Instead, the goal must be to retrieve the succour of women's beauteous and natural psychic form. Fairy tales, myths, and stories provide understanding which sharpen our sight so that we can pick up the path left by the wildest nature. The instructions found in story reassure us that the path has not run out, but still leads women deeper and more deeper still into their own knowing. The tracks which we are all following are those of the wild woman archetype, the innate instinctual self. I call her wild woman, for those very words, wild and woman, create la mar, toca a la puerta, the fairy tale knock on the door of a deep female psyche. La mar a toca a la puerta means literally to play upon the instrument of the name in order to open the door. It means using words that summon up the opening of a passageway. No matter by which culture a woman is influenced, she understands the words wild and women intuitively. When women hear those words, an old memory is stirred and brought back to life. The memories of our absolute, undeniable and irrevocable kinship with the wild feminine. A relationship which may have become ghostly from neglect, buried by over-domestication, outlawed by the surrounding culture, or no longer understood anymore. We may have forgotten her names, we may not answer when she calls ours, but in our bones we know her, we yearn towards her. We know she belongs to us as we to her. It is into this fundamental, elemental, essential relationship that we are born, and that our essence that we are also derived from. The wild woman archetype sheathes the alpha matrilineal being. There are times when we experience her, even if more fleeting. This makes us mad with wanting to continue. For some women, this vitalizing taste of the wild comes during pregnancy, during nursing their young, during the miracle of change in oneself as one raises a child, during attending to a loving relationship as one would attend to a beloved garden. A sense of it also comes through visions, through sights of great beauty. I have felt her when I see what we call in the woodlands a Jesus God sunset. I have felt her in the move in me from seeing the fishermen come up the lake at dusk with lanterns lit, and also from seeing my new baby's toes lined up like a sweet row of sweet corn. We see her where we see her, which is everywhere. She comes to us through sound as well, through music which vibrates in the sternum, excites the heart. It comes through the drum, the whistle, the call, the cry. It comes through the written, spoken word, sometimes a word, a sentence, a poem, or a story. It is so resonant, so right, it causes us to remember, at least for an instant, what substance we are really made from, and where our true home is. These transients, tastes of the wild, come during the mystique inspiration. Ah, there it is. Oh, now it's gone. The longing for her comes when one happens to come across someone who has secured this wildish relationship. The longing comes when one realises one has given scant time to the mystic cookfire, or to dream time. Too little time to one's own creative life, one's life's work, or one's true loves. Yet it is these fleeting tastes which come both through as beauty as well as loss. It causes us to be bereft, so agitated, so longing, that we must eventually pursue the wildish nature. When we leap into the forest, or into the desert, or into the snow, and run hard, our eyes scanning the ground, or hearing sharply tuned, searching under, searching over, searching for a clue, a remnant, a sign that she still lives, that we may not have lost our chance. And when we pick up her trail, it is typical of women to ride hard to catch up, to clear off the desk, to clear off the relationship, clear out one's mind, turn to a new page, insist on a break the rules, stop the world, for we are not going on without her any longer. Once women have lost her and then found her again, they will be content to keep her for good. Once they have regained her, they will fight and fight hard to keep her. For with her, their creative life blossoms, their relationships gain meaning and depth and health. Their cycles of sexuality, creativity, work and play are re-established. They are no longer marks for the predations of others. They are entitled equally under the laws of nature to grow and to thrive. Now their end-of-day fatigue comes with satisfying work and endeavours, not from being shut up in all too small mindset jobs or relationship. They know instinctively when things must die and when things must live. They know how to walk away and they know how to stay. When women reassert their relationship to their wildest nature, they are gifted with a permanent and internal watcher, a knower, a visionary, an oracle, an an intuitive, a maker, a creator, an inventor, a listener who guides, suggests, and urges a vibrant life for both inner and outer worlds. When women are with the wild women, the fact of the relationship glows through them. This wild teacher, wild mother, wild mentor supports their inner and outer lives no matter what. So the world is wild and not used to this modern pejorative sense, meaning out of control, but in its original sense, which means to live a natural life, one of which the circa creature has innate integrity and healthy boundaries. These words, wild and women, cause women to remember who they are and what they're about. They create a metaphor to describe the force which funds all females. They personify a force that women can't live without. The wild woman archetype can be expressed in other terms which are equally apt. You can call this powerful psychological nature instinctive nature, but wild woman is the force which lies behind all of that. You can call it natural psyche, but the archetype of the wild woman stands behind that as well. You can call it innate, the basic nature of women. You can call it ingenious, intrinsic nature of women. In poetry, it might be called other, or the seven oceans of the universe, or the far woods, or the friend. In various psychologies, from various perspectives, it would be called the id, the self, medianal nature. In biology, it would be called the typical or fundamental nature. But because it is tacit, prescient, and visceral among the cantadors, it is called the wise or knowing nature. Sometimes it is called the woman who lives till the end of time, or the woman who lives at the edge of the world. And this creatura, or creature, is always a creator hag, a death goddess, a maiden in descent, or a number of other personifications. She is both friend and mother to all that have lost their way, all those who need learning, all those who have a riddled soul, all those out in the forest or the desert wandering and searching. In actuality, the psychoid unconscious, the layer from which the wild woman emanates, the wild woman has no name, for she is so vast. But since wild woman engenders the very important facet of womanliness here on earth, she has many, many names, not only in order to peer in the myriad aspects of her nature, but also to hold on to her. Because in the beginning of retrieving our relationships with her, she can turn to smoke in an instant. By naming her, we create her a territory of thought and feeling within us. Then she will come, and if valued, she will stay. So in Spanish, she might be called Rio Abjo Rio, the river beneath the river, La Mujer Grande, the great woman, Luz del Abyss, the light from the abyss. In Mexico, she is La Loba, the wolf woman, La Huesera, the bone woman. She is called in Hungarian, O Erdobin, she of the woods, and Rozomak, the wolverine. The Navajo, she is the Naashijei Asza. Apologies for these terrible pronunciations. The spider woman who weaves the fate of humans and animals, plants and rocks. In Guatemala, amongst many other names, she is the Humana del Nibla, the mist being, the woman who has lived forever. In Japan, she is Amastura Omikami, the Numian, who brings all light, all consciousness. In Tibet, she is called the Dankini, the dance force which is clear seeing within women, and it goes on, she goes on. The comprehension of this wild woman nature is not religion but practice. It is a psychology in the truest sense. Psyche, soul, ology, or logos, a knowing of the soul. Without her, women are without ears to hear, or soul talk to register the chiming of their own inner rhythms. Without her, women's inner eyes are closed by some shadow.